All right. Okay. Hold on. Okay. So, hey, everybody on Instagram, just let me know that you hear me right now because y'all are always so good to me in my DIY studio. Hey, Soma, can you let me know if you see the live right now? Hey, fam, if one of y'all could let me know that you're seeing me and Claudia right now, because I know this is where the most people are at. Okay, I think we're good. All right. The reason I do that is because I use StreamYard so I can post it, but it's all these rules and but you probably know that because you've been doing hundreds of interviews. So I think we're good. Hey, girl.
How are you? It's good to see you. It's
It's
been a
good to
minute.
see you.
Not nice hair. I'm loving the color.
Well, that's from you.
I love the color.
Every time I saw you in the last year, I was like, let me try something new. A little longer, not short. So yeah. But this is
Yes.
annoying too. It goes in your eyes. Okay. Hey girl, what's good? Let's go. Oh my God. Okay, everybody. I don't read people's bios because I don't let people anymore read my bio on a stage because it's just like long and you're like, what kind of thing. So we're just going to start. But what I will say is that I've been so blessed to know Claudia for probably 2 decades, her
Hmm.
family, her son, people in our community. And honestly, like when I found that, I was like, yes. Right. I said yes. But every time I do an interview, I have to say, I am no longer the first Afro Latina on a presidential ticket because you and Karina are broke the mold. So because folks, I know I keep reintroducing myself, but basically in 2008, Green Party candidate, 16 years later. So for a long time, I was the only one. But then I see Claudia, I see Karina, and although Melina Abdullah on the Justice for All Party with Dr. West is not a Latina, I kind of think she is. So I was like, you three not only broke the mold, what y'all been putting out, especially you, Claudia, is just so clear. And then I was like, we're both from the Bronx, so that's what we do.
That, that's right. That's what
So
we
thank
do.
you for coming here. Just let folks know like who you are and the work that you do.
Well, thank you for having me. We have known each other for a little bit over 2 decades. I actually met you where you were doing journalism, guerrilla style journalism in every movement space there could have been. It was you and Mari Nieves out there recording what we were doing, and so I appreciate you. I'm from the Bronx, specifically from the South Bronx, which is a very particular space in the Bronx. I'm a mom.
Yes.
I am a second generation immigrant to Dominican parents. I identify as Afro Caribbean because there's a political and radical history and legacy that comes with that identity. I am a theologian, so I was raised up in the liberation theology movement at work, and I'm a proud socialist. I've been a socialist and doing work around anti-imperial um, consciousness in this country for almost 3 decades now. I started doing organizing at 13, and I started doing a lot of organizing around the Puerto Rican political prisoners in the 90s, and a lot of work with street organizations and anti police brutality that were led by Richie Harris,
Rest in
who
freedom.
is who's
Rest
a
in freedom.
dear comrade and ancestor. And so I'm just very proud to be in the space that I'm in. I am a member and part of the leadership of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, an organization that I've known for for about 20 years since it started, and who I've been organizing with for a long time. And so I was asked if I would take on this task and nominated to become the presidential candidate for 2024, which is something that I would have never thought of in my wildest dreams. I'm an educator. I like organizing. I like being on the ground. And so being public facing and speaking around the issues and conditions of our people obviously is something that I'm used to doing, but not at this scale. And so for me is an incredible responsibility, and I don't take it lightly. But I'm happy to be here and contribute in this way in this historic moment, because we're living in a very historic and decisive moment. And so it's important to have an explicitly socialist campaign happening at the moment.
Yeah, so a lot of people to this day, when I do interviews, they're like, what made you decide to run for vice president? And I tell them this story. I had a daughter and a husband. I was broke. I was broke. I had to move in with my sister, who's younger than me in a good way, and she took us in. And Cynthia called me, and I was like, yeah, I guess I'm unemployed. Why not? You know? And it's interesting. I called a lot of people, but the first person that was like, go do that was M1 for Dead Prez. He's like, I'm not even with any of this voting thing, but go do that. You know, so you've been a stalwart, especially what socialism means politically. Did someone call you, or you were like, I'm about to do this?
Well, I'm like I mentioned, I'm a member of a political party that actually is not an electoral party.
That party's name, even though I know it.
It's a party for socialism and liberation. And it's been a party that has been in existence for 20 years. The members and the founders have been doing a lot of work for over 30. Some of them have been socialists for as long as they've been around and alive. So born into socialist families. And so it has a long tradition of anti-imperialist work and anti-white supremacy, anti-patriarchal systems. I mean, you name it, they've been in struggle and movements for 2 decades as a party. And as a party, we always put forth a presidential candidate. And the previous presidential candidates have been Gloria La Riva, Eugene Puryear, and other folks. For this particular moment, and for this particular moment, like in history, like I co-founded the People's Forum, and I was directing the People's Forum in New York City, which is an incubator for social movement organizers, nurturing young people and providing political education, mostly free of any charge, providing infrastructure for the movement. So I was very not like even thinking about being the presidential candidate for anything. And I was a party member, and I was approached, and I thought of it a lot. I thought about it a lot. And when I thought about it as a mass education opportunity, as an opportunity to reach out to younger people and actually break through the idea that the only options that you have are the options that the ruling class put forth to you, then I was like, of course, I'll do it. And then I was given the task to talk to Karina, because if I am not the person to be like in front of cameras or whatever, Karina is also not that. We're moms. We have a whole bunch of other responsibilities. And we talked about it, and we, reflected on it, and we chose to say yes to the nomination. And then, as every political party, it goes through its process of affirming and voting. And we were voted in to do this task. But it wasn't something like we were so clear that it was the furthest thing from our minds. And we were both doing a lot of like education work within the party and outside through other spaces. And so, yeah.
That's so important, because also like social media, which we didn't have in 2008, but that you and Karina had to think through it. So in all of my relationship with you, I've just seen you as just incredible organizer with politics, because I think like most of us may not have what you talk about, especially as a, Afro-Dominican woman. So you get the nomination, and then you're here. You're going around the country speaking to people anywhere from Iowa, which I was like, oh, I never went there, to Kansas and everything. In your traveling, what are you seeing? Maybe in a specific region,
Hmm.
or maybe not. What are people telling you they're most concerned about, and what is going to guide them to vote?
I mean, people are suffering. People are suffering in all ways and forms. I went to this community in South Carolina where they have the highest rates of amputations due to diabetes in the whole country.
Hmm.
Um, for
And there were
every three
Latinos
people,
in Iowa, right? Because I've spoken there and was very
oh
surprised,
yeah,
like mad
yeah, yeah.
Latinos in the state of Iowa.
Everywhere you could find Latinos in Iowa. There's a lot of Latinos, Mexicans, and Puerto Ricans in the Carolinas, both in South Carolina and North Carolina.
Yeah, my sister lives in North
Um,
Carolina, so yeah,
yeah. So
there's a
there's,
lot.
obviously we're everywhere, and a lot of it has to do with not only the displacement that happens in the cities across the country, but also the displacement that happens across the region, the American continent. Where people are being displaced massively because of U.S. imperialist, intervention, or because there are U.S. companies and corporations that are building resorts and doing all sorts of things that are displacing people. In the case of Puerto Rico, colonialism, right? Like a lot of people have left because the colonial status of Puerto Rico doesn't allow
Right.
people to live. There's no education infrastructure, there's no public transportation infrastructure. Like it's been completely devastated. And so
Claudia, let me
going through.
interject this at this moment. A massive amount of gentrification and cryptocurrency white men trying to take the land or the house that we have in Puerto Rico. And the reason I tell folks this specific thing is, like, in Caribbean nations, you don't go to the bank or the lawyer to say, like, this is my house, I'm leaving it to my first daughter, or for you don't do that. But that's the way it has been done in Puerto Rico, which also is a colonial experiment. So
Mhm.
you decide to do this. Who's the first person you say talk to in your family, and how do people respond?
I mean, I really didn't necessarily go into my family to share. My nieces found out because remember, I mean, just for context, so if folks know, we launched the campaign September 7th, and so the campaign is launched, and a month later, like exactly,
They
there, you know, Gaza happens. And so by then, we're out organizing because the party has its roots in movement. What we do is organize. So October 7th happened. October 8th, we were in the streets organizing around Palestine. The big marches in New York, all across the country. The party has presence in over 92 cities. Everyone was out. So my nieces found out because there was a there was a video of me actually just screaming because the NYPD wouldn't let us have a bullhorn. They wouldn't let us have any type of sounds. And so somewhere it said, PSL presidential candidate Claudia de la Cruz, and my niece just texted me and she said, Titi, are you running for president? And I said, yeah, baby, we'll talk about that later. And
when I go see
and
you in a week.
and then things evolved and they start following the page, and it's like, okay, this makes sense. And there's a lot of things that they don't necessarily know in terms of politics and socialism for many reasons, because we live in the world that we live, and also because they're young. And so they start asking questions in terms of like, so but why is it that there's not enough of a platform for third parties? Why is it that I never knew that there was third parties?
Yeah.
Why is it, that the only two people that get the platform for debates? I mean, I was in Atlanta when the debate was happening between Biden and Trump,
Oh, you
and I was right outside. We were protesting it. And so their questions were real. Like, these two, this is a joke. These two are not even talking about the issues that matter to people. You just asked, what are the things that people are most concerned with? Housing is a huge issue all across the country.
yes.
Healthcare and access to healthcare, wages are crazy. Like, there are companies that are moving to the South and are being told you could come to the South because there's no unionizing. You don't have to worry about unionized labor in the South. And they're giving tax breaks to all these corporations to go exploit people in the South, and so there's so many different cities, but the situations where people are economically, where people are socially, are so connected to one another. And I think that is prime for revolutionary action, and that's why there's so much counter revolution that's happening, because people
Yeah.
are fed up. The cop cities that are being built across this country, they're being built for a reason.
Yeah.
And they're being built because people are waking up to the reality that the corporate duopoly, that all these local officials, they're all sellouts. And so people are trying to do for themselves what the state won't do. And that becomes an issue for the state. And so these cop cities are being built precisely to surveil and to keep control of the population. And so people across the country are waking up to that reality. I was reading a poll to answer to my niece, who was like, why is it that we don't know about third parties? And I said to her, based on the poll, and I think it's a New York Times poll that says that 70% of the US population actually favors a third party. So we're not a marginal element. 70% of the US population, the reason that they limit the accessibility and the understanding of the population to what third parties are is because we actually are a threat to the duopoly, because there's a lot of people who don't vote because they understand voting is a sham, who would be more prone to vote for a third party candidate.
Yeah.
And so, and sharing that with my niece, she was like, she's now of voting age. And so she's been one of the biggest promoters for the campaign. She's like, yes, we're going to do that. So
I know, like, my daughter is a little older, and she was like, Mom, I love you, but I want to vote. No, she was like, Mom, I want to vote for Harris. How do you feel about that? I said, I'm just glad you're 19 years old and going to go and vote. You know what I'm saying? Because I think what has happened, I don't think, what has happened in this election cycle is, like you said, so many young people are like, why is it only two choices? Like, this is not a democracy, and then everything happening. So when you're traveling around the country, what's like a couple of the issues that people are really dealing with when you go around the country to talk?
I mean, the economy was huge.
Yeah.
The people are not. I've met people who are low wage workers in the South that are working, everything from Cracker Barrel to like Chick-fil-A's, like people who are earning just enough to live. Some people who are living off their cars, people who are living off their cars parked in Walmart, who have a full-time job.
Claudia, let me just interject this. When you guys watch the mainstream media and they talk about inflation and loans, that comes through every aspect, including your food, your oil bill, your car, all of that. And the numbers don't show such a progressive action with with Biden, but you're seeing that because you're talking to the people.
Of course, you talk to people and where they're hurting. The biggest thing with Biden, Harris, with Trump is that they're not of our class, or they're very divorced from the reality of people. I mean, when you think about, when I go buy eggs, I have a 9-year-old that eats like a 14-year-old. When I go buy eggs or I go buy milk, we're talking about 3 times what it was worth last year. 3 times,
Yeah.
not 2, 3 times what it was worth last year. And I'm lucky enough to, like, I'm a worker. I have a full-time job. I'm doing all this political work. I'm a mom, and I'm able to purchase it. But again, there's the majority of people in this country who have to make the decision between eating or possibly paying for public transportation to get to work, or buying medicine, or feeding their kids, or having a mom make the decision of eating herself or feeding her children. Those are the decisions that people are making every day. And these politicians are making a political choice every time they neglect the reality of people in this country. And I feel like people, again, are understanding that their reality is not necessarily as impacted as we are told by who becomes the president of the United States, because in that corporate duopoly, be them the Republicans or the Democrats, they're good. The ruling class is good. The people are the ones that often suffer. People talk about like the taxes and the tariffs on China without understanding that the tariffs that Trump put on these on any type of export or exchange with China do not necessarily impact the corporations. They impact us because we need to pay the taxes for those goods now. And so when they talk about inflation, it's almost like this thing that happens in a vacuum, that it wasn't created. And in fact, it was created by the capitalists. And the price gouging that is happening is something that the Democrats have allowed to happen. They have allowed for corporations to raise the prices crazy.
And I'm glad you're saying that, because then you begin to see, because I work from home every day, you begin to now see all the commercials where like your Subway sandwich was $12 and now we're making it $6, right? And then they push that cost on the workers of their chain restaurant and everything. And we're seeing that. But also, as you've been out there, what are people saying specifically? I'm just curious to know about the DNC and that party in general. Is it apathetic or more like they just don't care about us and we're going to move somewhere else?
I mean, there's a lot of folks who the propaganda is huge, and it plays to the emotions, and it weaponizes identities and culture in a way that is crazy. Like when you sit there and you watch, it's a performance, and it's a performance like any other performance. It's almost like the Hunger Games. They create an illusion that is very much divorced from the reality. I mean, during the DNC, I was there. There were thousands of people marching outside, people who are being, harassed and to a certain extent brutalized by cops too. And they were having the time of their lives inside that hall in the DNC, very disconnected from the reality of tens of thousands of people who were saying, you are all genocidal lunatics. Like, that was not even part of what the coverage was in a lot of ways in mainstream media. Our independent media covered it, but mainstream media didn't, because it was all about the performance within the DNC, and it's crazy to think that they don't even have to say, like, they don't even have to uplift the things that they did with Hillary, where it was like all about women's rights and feminism and all these different things. They've evolved to the point where they don't even have to mention that we're talking about Harris, a Black Asian American woman, because we have been so conditioned to think that that's the only thing that matters. Nobody asks about what her politics are. What are her priorities? What has been her record? It's kind of like, if I see her, I see me, and this is all that matters. And people are just, again, conditioned and filled with this liberal virus that just doesn't allow them to think critically. And there's a whole lot of people like that. And I feel like, the honeymoon will be over, just like it was with Obama, just like it was with Clinton. People get excited, and then they get to see who these folks are, which is they're there to protect capitalism and to protect U.S. empire. We listen to the speeches. Like, Michelle Obama gets up there and says, we don't have to cheat our way to win. Girl, that's all y'all do. Cheat. Like, you just
that's all y'all. No, that's true.
You cheat, you bomb people, you invade other people's nations, you brutalize communities all across the country, because we need to remember, it was 8 years of Obama. It wasn't 4. It was 8 years of Obama. And then there were 4 years of Trump, and then 4 years of Biden. So who's been in power in the last 16 years? Is the Democrats. And so
you're right. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that there is this conditioning that has happened with the Obama mania. There was a whole wave of identity politics that were cemented. Here comes a Black man who's articulate, who's intelligent, who has all these degrees, who can speak, because I got to give it to him. He could speak, and he is very, very, very brilliant. And so is Michelle Obama. So they put these folks there, And they weaponize our emotions because our people have been beaten over the head so much.
Weaponizing our emotions. That's
Yeah.
That's
I mean, our people have been, the confidence of our people rests on who makes it, quote unquote, who makes it. If the person who makes it is an Obama and he's a black man, knowing what our black men have had to deal with on the day to day, then we have to back this black man. You know, the same thing with Harris at this point. And people are like, well, she's gonna do different. Well, she's the sitting VP. She is sitting next to Biden right now and has not taken any progressive measures around anything, not around the genocide in Gaza, not around abortion rights, not about migration. What makes you think that once she gets to the presidency, being backed with all the major donors that are very similar to the major donors of Trump, this woman is going to do anything?
Yeah, because her speech, when you look at it around public policy, was not at all.
Oh, no.
Anything on public policy. It was more like, y'all want him and y'all want us. And if you don't want him and you want, like, it was a little condescending, but it was definitely no specific policies, because we know, we know what she's going to do. I think that most people, like, as organizers, I believe that we have empathy in us. And then outside that space is that people are really looking at seeing a Black South Asian woman as the president, and it's symbolic to them. So if it's symbolic, I'm going to vote for you, even if I disagree with everything you're about. My take on that is like, then you're taking on the whole mantra of two evils. Which one's less? They're all bad. That's why it's evil.
Yeah, no, and not only that. I mean, you're also in so many ways validating your exploitation. You're consenting to it, because voting. There was a Brown University study that came out that said that public opinion has zero value to the development of public policy. That's crazy. I mean, I think we knew that, but that a Brown University study actually reveals that public opinion has zero value, that the actual value for the development of policy comes from corporations and Wall Street. This is written in a study. So if we know this and we consider that voting is somehow the way that we're going to get our interests reflected in government, we're off, because that's not what happens. If you were to go around and ask people what has significantly changed for you every 4 years after a president wins an election, nothing actually significantly changes. In fact, things have gotten worse. Be them Democrats or Republicans, the economy has gotten worse. The accessibility to healthcare has gotten worse. Civil rights have been rolled back. And so if we know that that's the case, then what we do with our vote is consent.
Yes.
And we need to think about it in that way. We're voting and we're consenting for Harris to continue to bomb babies in Gaza. We're voting and we're consenting for Trump to put in effect Project 2025, which is, by the way, not only a Trump project, is a project of the ruling class that includes Democrats. And that has been something that has been under development for decades. It's not something that just came up last year.
Let me tell folks, so what Claudia is speaking to, it's a Heritage Foundation that they did the similar thing in the 80s or the 90s. And that when Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House, he wrote this book called The Contract for America. So basically, when everybody talks about 2025, most of us who are organizing activists, we're like, we've been seeing this. Like, it's not new. It's just now it's in a really big book, right?
But it's been under development. You know what I'm saying? And so I think it's important for people to be reminded of the fact that this project is not exclusive of Trump, and that it's underway. It might necessarily accelerate with Trump in the presidency, but that doesn't mean it's gonna stop if Harris is there. I mean, the Supreme Court.
It's a system.
The Supreme Court has
you don't need women can be patriarchal in what they believe. You know what I'm saying? Let me, and I tell folks, I'm like, just because this dude is in the area where I grew up, Richie Torres, He is an Afro gay Boricua,
And
and
he's the
he's the
worst.
most right wing nonsense. And that's why I've been like, in doing the work around Afro Black Latinx politics and identities, like it's the same thing. Just because you see someone that looks like you doesn't mean that person that looks like you isn't going to be against the
Of
community.
course.
And
Of
that's
course.
the visual kind of things where people are like, if I see someone, we're making progress. No, visual representation is not power.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how
And
this white supremacy wins.
yeah,
It's not
and that's how we,
power.
and that's key, that representation doesn't equate power, because there's a lot of Black folks, there's a lot of Latinx folks, there's a lot of lesbian, gay, there's transgender folks, there's a lot of, they have the united colors of oppression and exploitation, you name it, they got it. And what they do is that when it's time to utilize those identities against us, they line up. They all line up to defend capitalism and the US empire, to defend corporations, to defend Wall Street, and against us. And we need to be really, really clear on how that plays out. I mean, this woman got up and she did, I mean, it was a coronation. It wasn't even a convention. It was a coronation of Harris.
Yes.
That is it. And Harris stands up and says, we're going to build the most lethal military force, as if people are concerned with having the most lethal military force when they can't have a doctor's appointment because that'll bankrupt them. Like when people can't afford to buy food, when people can't afford housing, like, if that's your concern, that says a lot about you and who are you trying to protect, because there hasn't been a war that has been fought in our name that actually has been there to protect us of anything. It's been there to protect US interests in the Middle East, in Asia, in Africa. None of it has to do with the working class people here. Those wars are for the elite, for the rich, for Wall Street, for corporations. And so I feel like we need to be clear on who our enemy is, and our enemy might just look like us. And
I mean,
unfortunately,
that's the whole point. Like Barack
yeah,
Obama wasn't just a Black president, he was
yeah,
the leader of the Democratic Party.
yeah.
So I'm so grateful to have Claudia. She has more Matt interviews today. One thing, well, two things, but what will you say to people? What are you saying to people that say the third parties that are bound? Like, let's be real, fam. There's a Libertarian Party,
Yeah.
RFK's Party, Party for Socialism and Liberation. We got the Green Party, the Justice for All Party. And obviously, like, that's the entire conversation, because that's how they have framed it when Hillary Clinton lost, as opposed to being like, she still got 3 million votes that were discounted. Like, what is this system of democracy where someone could, get 3 million votes against their opponent? What would you say, and what do you say when people come to you and be like, you're going to be the reason that Harris doesn't win? Your
I mean,
party's.
they're giving us so much power. They're giving us so much power, that I wouldn't even fight that. I wouldn't argue that. I'd be like, yeah, actually, and we could do so much more. Come join us. Because ultimately, we don't have control of the media. Like,
right.
Our campaigns aren't covered massively. Our campaigns are shunned out of debates. Our campaigns are actually fighting lawsuits and challenges in Georgia, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania. You know what I'm saying? And so we don't have access, money, or power in the ways in which the Democrats make it seem when they lose. They lose because they're not good, and people know they ain't shit. People know they're a sham. And so there are many people who don't vote in this country who, if they find a third party that resonates with what they think, will vote for a third party. There are people who are in the fence, who have been beaten and betrayed and denied space by the Democratic Party so much that they just can't and won't align themselves with them anymore. Those people will look to third parties. But it is not a matter of stealing votes. They haven't earned their votes, because you have to earn votes. You can't just come here and demand. Like, that's a very entitled, oppressive way of of thinking about democracy. I mean, it's also the democracy that doesn't guarantee healthcare, that doesn't guarantee the most basic human rights, but expects you to vote for your exploiter every 4 years. So it just doesn't make sense. This whole
Yeah.
spoiler, vote, this whole, it's crazy because again, it gives us an element of power in ways that we don't necessarily have because we don't have access.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even think about that. Like, exactly, let me say this before we wrap up. So you become the president and Karina becomes the vice president. Give me three things y'all would do first.
Listen, we need to free all political prisoners. That's one of the main things.
That one. I didn't know,
We need
but I
to
was
free all political prisoners.
yes.
We have to cease all sorts of negotiations with the colonial state of Israel. No more weapons, no more money. And I think that there's reparations due to the Palestinian people from the
Absolutely.
United States. I think
Yes.
that there are reparations due to Black Americans and Indigenous people in this country. I think that there is a need to decolonize and give reparations to Puerto Rico and allow people to return and build their nation.
Thank you.
And one of the biggest things that I think we need to do in this country is also make poverty a state of emergency. Actually take poverty into consideration and reorganize the economy to work for working class people. Those are the things that I feel for us are on the top of our docket of things to do.
Oh my God, I didn't think about a couple of those, but so everybody will vote. What do you think might happen after that? But also, what do you want to leave, especially to younger people watching this? Like, I'm sure that you get the question every day. I get it every day. Like, how are you an organizer? And I'm like, it's like a lot of easier for you if you do social media, but it is more like your generation, my generation. The way we came to our politics is about where we live, who we hang with, then we become voices and all that kind of stuff. So what would you say to them? But again, before that, and I'm glad you mentioned Gaza. You've been out there, and now we're seeing the next. They just raided the West Bank, and we
Yeah.
probably know people in the West Bank. But if you could just remind people your politic on that, that also includes the question of, as all these students coming back to higher ed, I feel, and everything I'm reading, is that they're going to vamp on students, whether it's an Ivy League or community college. And that concerns me just around like free speech. And also like it's the students that pay your salary that are having policy changes because you don't want to say, or you want them not to say one word. It's crazy what's happening out here, and and how these folks are shutting us down and shutting down students, because you've been in college environments teaching students.
I mean, you need to take into consideration that yes, the students pay tuition, and big donors for these, especially the elite universities, are the ones that set the tone for what happens in that university. And that's what allows for these universities to have investments in the colonial state of Israel, for having research that supports colonization. And so they're like private equities. These universities are not necessarily for the development or the edification of people's knowledge. They serve capitalism. That's what they're there for. And the idea is that they will form the next generation of capitalists. And so what they're finding is that they have people in those universities, students that are coming from the ranks of working class communities, from immigrant communities, from different diasporas, that are organizing based on their consciousness and their just unwillingness to support and back what these universities are willing to do against their own people, like against the people that of the students that are there, their families, And so I feel like there is going to be a continued moment of resistance within these universities. I think that the students have been in the streets during the summer. They didn't just go away. They've been in the
Right.
streets, they've been organizing, they've been mobilizing. If anything, they're coming back into those spaces with way more strength and more radicalization. And so they're gonna continue to do what they were doing last semester. And of course, that universities are not gonna meet them with a friendly smile. They're gonna meet them with police and repression like they have. And so I think if you're asking what would I tell young people, is that the strength is in organizing. The strength is not necessarily solely organizing in our computers through social medias. It's about building organization. If you're a student and you are in a university, find a student organization that you can
Exactly.
belong to. If there is no student organization, build one. If you're a
Yeah.
worker, unionize your workplace. If you are in your community and you happen to hang out with a lot of other young people that are like-minded, build an organization. If you, I mean, this moment is a pivotal moment because there are many things that are shifting. And one of the most important things that is shifting is the consciousness of people. People have been radicalized in the last 11 months, and we cannot allow for cooptation to happen, which is often what happens with movements. You have so-called leaders that become misleaders of our people, and then they funnel them back into the Democrats. We need to find our way into independent movement, and the only way that we do that is through organizing and building organization that is independent of the Democratic Party, of the Republican Party. And so I think that
No,
we have a huge task, but I think it's possible because people are hungry for it.
I mean, and then people are literally hungry.
Yeah, literally
Like,
hungry. But that's it, because
yeah.
their conditions are telling them, like, they're very specific. Like, if you think about the Black Panther Party, and the moment the Black Panther Party comes into the scene, you're talking about a population of people who experience segregation, who experience, like, they were the first, the last ones to be hired and the first ones to be fired. Exploitation was there. Communities didn't have, access to education, and if they had access to education, it was based on white supremacy. Like, it was a very, like, the moment was ripe for that type of revolutionary intervention. The global scenario was also that as well. It was revolutions everywhere. We're in that moment right now, actually.
Mhm.
Um,
I agree.
People are waking up. Organizations are being built. Though, like, Niger is like U.S. out of Niger. France, as like all of you colonizers got to go.
Yeah, and everything
Burkina
happened in
Faso.
Sudan,
Yes,
Haiti, Congo, even Nigerian as students rose up there. So
yeah. So people are waking up to the reality that the current system doesn't work. And so what happens when this moment of mass mobilization ends and you don't have an organization, people are easily co-opted into other spaces. So we need to build the organizations that are going to receive the people that have been radicalized, so that we could radicalize them further, and so that we could be ready for the
yeah,
next moment, because there's
absolutely.
going to be a next moment.
Of course, there's going to be, especially if this dude wins or whatever. I do
Yeah.
have one specific question from viewers. What is the status of PSL on the ballot in DC, Washington, DC?
So we're getting write-ins in a lot of states. Let me see. Actually, I don't want to get this wrong. So I'm gonna go on.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
please.
go. Yeah,
Yeah, thank
but
you.
we're getting write-in in a lot of states. We're actually going to be in 2022 ballots, which is a lot. It's
That's
actually
yeah.
for being in an explicitly socialist campaign. I think the one historic explicitly socialist campaign that had as much reach was Eugene Debs in the 1920s. Um, because it's, we're not running as anything else but socialist. Like, that's our platform.
Right.
And so it's historic. Okay, so we are on the California ballot, in Hawaii, in Idaho, Louisiana, Minnesota, New Jersey, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Utah, Vermont, Washington, Wisconsin. Those are the ones that we have now confirmed. There's some that we're waiting for confirmation. We've submitted the petitions for, and I believe that DC is a write-in, if I'm not mistaken. We are on the ballot in Virginia, but I think DC is a write-in. So
Yeah,
official
like
right
when
now.
I was living in North Carolina and I had to write my name down, but then my parents, voted in New York, and my mom was so cute. She took the picture of me and of the voting booth. She's like, "I voted for you." My dad's like, "I'm not gonna tell you how I vote." I was like, "Yeah, Dad." Like, no, in the best way. He's like, "Vote para
Practice
qué?"
right, you know.
No, my dad's like, "We're not free in Puerto Rico," and I'm like, "No, Dad, I get it." And he's like, "You went to college and taught me." I'm like, "Dad, will you vote for me?" He said, "Nope, I vote for my values." I said, "All right, Dad." I was like, I feel you. I don't know what that was, but one last question. I mean, you have a child, you have a family. What was their reaction and how they've seen you in this journey?
I mean, my son, he is, when I tell you he's 9 going on 14, he's really 9 going on 14. But he has been around movement work since he was born, since he was in the belly. And so there's certain things that he understands. And so when I first started speaking to him and telling him like I'm going to run for president, he was really excited. And the first thing he said is, "I don't want to live in the White House ever." Because he knows what the White House represents for us and the
Yeah.
rest of the world. And that is where we go protest. And so he's like, "I don't want to,"
I don't
and
want to
just
be
to
there.
be funny, that is not what we want. What we want is to build organization. What we want is to contribute to build a movement. What we want is, to have these cops out of our neighborhoods. What we want is this. And he was like, "Okay, I can get down with that," and he's been very supportive. My parents as well. Like my mom takes care of Broken whenever I'm not around. My
Mm,
friends. So it's been very like a community effort. I feel like the people, you don't have to be a socialist to understand that our people need better, that our people are worth better, that we deserve to live in with dignity, that we deserve to have a right of contributing and deciding over our lives, in ways that are meaningful, not in the ways in which we're told we have representation, but we don't have a saying. And so I feel like even if they're not socialists, they don't claim themselves to be, they understand that we need to struggle for humanity and the planet, and what's happening is urgent. And so the people around me are very supportive, and then there's a whole party. So I have comrades all across the country that are very supportive, comrades that are down to take care of my kid when I need it, to have play dates with my kid and Tati, who's Karina's baby. Karina is literally, she about to pop. she
up the next.
Yeah, in the next couple of weeks. And so we have organization, and that's why we make such an emphasis in saying that if we want to be able to get anywhere, we need to be organized and we need to be in community to do it.
Yeah, and for me, my story, I don't begin as an organizer being born in the movement. It came from going to universities in the 90s and all of that. But the first thing I told Justice, my husband, is like, "Oh my God, we're gonna raise her in the movement." Just like you were in the movement, and your partner, and raised these children in the movement, because I did not grow up as a movement person. I became a person. And I look at all the pictures of everything where we were all together. Like, we had her there when she was 1, we had her there when she was 8, and now she's 20, and is like very clear, like A, B, C, D, E, and thank you. And also pushing back, because she's like, "Mom, I love you, but I want to vote for the first Black woman." I was like, "You can. It's Claudia." She was like, "I'm going to get back to you."
And it's
But I
fine,
mean, well, yeah, and that's the whole thing. I think I truly believe that when you have a child in your life, especially one that you birth through your body, we grow up in this now, because I never wanted her to question what was happening. I wanted her to understand what's happening and join a group. So how do people get in contact with you, and support you, and Karina? And I'm just so grateful that we could talk, because when I saw it, I was like, "Yes, let's go." Like, yes, let's go. And
yeah.
lastly, because I keep telling people, like, right now they're fear mongering. There's mad people every day being like, "If you vote for a third party, then Trump is in." That's not how politics work. But
Yeah.
there's that level of fear mongering that they're beginning in case he does win. And I know that might be something that you probably have to answer all the time from
Yeah.
folks.
I mean,
Yeah.
I tell people, like, I mean, I love how you shared your story about your daughter. I mean, Alicia, la bella. um, and I remember her as a little baby, basically sleeping on coats while we were having events. Like, I remember that. I think we are here to facilitate our kids' journey. Like, that is what we're here for. We cannot deny them the opportunity to be fully who they are. We're here to expose them. We're here to facilitate their process. We're here to answer questions. We're here to break down the lies that they're told in school and share more information that could allow them to make informed decisions. And so
Yeah.
it sounds to me like you have done a hell of a job with justice in doing that. So big ups to you both. I think that the question of, of how people think and how people feel in relationship to the voting and whether they're going to give a vote to Trump or this and that, people will ultimately vote their values, like your dad said. People will vote again and understand that they either consent to something or not. I think people are also brought up in ways to do things without thinking critically about why they do them. And I think
Yeah.
our task as organizers, our task as educators is to raise the questions that make our people think, that make our people question their day to day and remove the guilt that we feel for being poor, for not having access to the most basic things,
Yeah.
for the things that we've been told that our deficiency is what produces our lacks, and that's not true, because the collective is a massive condition. Is if it were to be one person, yeah, but massively, out of 330 million people, 160 million people in this country can make a living and are living in or below poverty. That's massive. So it doesn't have to do with people's efficiency. It has to do with the system. So if we're able to speak to our people and have the revolutionary patience and have the revolutionary love and think about the fact that we're walking with people, because we weren't born knowing. We learned things so we could teach our people. And doing it in a loving way, in a way that we listen, is important as well. People voting this year will not necessarily, whether they vote for Harris or Trump, will not overturn the outcome of
Mm-hmm.
capitalism. Capitalism is going to be there, which means that corporations and Wall Street will continue to rule this country, that the military industrial complex will continue to be strengthened, that they will continue to have $1 trillion in their budget to go kill people across the seas. That is the reality. And so whatever happens November 5th, we need to be ready to be in these streets November 6th. We need to be
Yes.
ready to be organizing November 6th. We need to be ready to build a strong movement that actually becomes the force in this country. And third parties, again, are not a marginal element. Third parties have always existed to push the envelope, to make sure that it's known that the majority of people in this country's concerns are not represented in those two parties. And that, in fact, third parties have the possibility of gaining strength if we combine electoral politics with
Right.
movement work. Electoral
Exactly.
politics is this small. People need to engage in
Yeah.
organizing. People need to
Tactic.
engage in building organizations. If we don't do that and we leave it to electoral politics, we're never going
Yeah.
to win, because that's a very small part of it all.
And that's it. It's because it's a tactic, not a movement. And I
That's
think
right.
the last 10 years, with visibility of a lot of our people, they mistook that for power. And they don't
Yeah.
understand that's not power. So everybody, just a website, and obviously we wish you well. I hope I get to see you before this, and I really, really appreciate your time because you're doing so much. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you so. And the website is www.votesocialist2024.com. Folks can go at votesocialist24 on X, previously known as Twitter. Folks can go to Claudia_Carina2024 on Instagram. And we're also on TikTok. If you look for us, you'll find us. So thank you for having me.
Oh, mucho. I love you, girl. I have
Love
so
you
much
too.
respect for you. You taught me so many things I didn't think about. But abrazos, everybody watching this, please share out I'll catch Claudia after the election and see what we're gonna do.
Yes. Thank you.
Bendición. Thank you, Mama.
Igual.
Thank you.
Besos. Ciao.
Ciao. Hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that one. Share it. She's amazing. I have learned legit. I've learned so much from Claudia, like legit, so much. Kind of thing. Thank y'all for rocking with me. There'll be somebody tomorrow, but I'm not gonna share until tomorrow to make sure it's 100%. So thank y'all as always for rocking with me. Peace. Thank you. I'll be better at questions and stuff and answers.